Welcome to this review video for the fundamentals quiz number 1. And let me start by going over what kind of questions will be on the quiz, and then we'll go over and cover some of the review things. The first section will be a matching section, and that is matching different people with what they did, whether they invented certain false religions or certain false ideologies, but it is a big matching section. Then there's a couple of multiple choice sections, and then there's about a half a page of short answer questions. And so, of course, that might be one of the harder types of questions. And then there is an essay question. I like essay questions, and we discussed quite a bit this essay question, so I think you should do well on it. There is a couple of bonus questions, and I will tell you that the bonus questions come from your reading. And so as long as you did your reading homework and you look over that, you might get some bonus questions, which means that you can get over 100% on this quiz. All right, so let's go over some of the things that you will find on it. Of course, we first talked about different people that were creating false and very bad ideologies at the end of the 1800s. We mentioned Julius Wellhausen, who is really kind of one of the ones that made higher and lower criticism kind of a big deal. We also mentioned that Wellhausen wrote the book History of Israel, in which a lot of the timeline, the time frame for Israel was changed to later dates. And of course, we don't believe in Wellhausen's dates, but that is what he did. We mentioned Joseph Smith established Mormonism in the early 1800s. Friedrich Nietzsche established the idea of existentialism. All right, that word that I can never say. All right, and he's the one that did that. We mentioned the theory of evolution was made popular by Charles Darwin in the late 1800s. Progressive education was given to us by John Dewey. And then Seventh-day Adventism, all right, by Ellen G. White. We mentioned Jehovah's Witness by Charles Taze Russell. Christian Science by Mary Baker Eddy, all right. She cooked the science, right? She's the baker, she cooked the science. Nothing Christian about Christian Science, nothing scientific about Christian Science either. It is a goofy religion. Then we mentioned the Unity religion, and that was the one where I gave you two names, all right? Two names brought together in one, all right? Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. The Charismatic Movement by Charles Parham and Henry Seymour. We mentioned the fundamentals were a series of essays that were written by preachers in an attempt to defend against all these pervading and invading false ideas. They were organized mainly by R.A. Torrey and, of course, some other men as well. We mentioned the idea of higher criticism, and we mentioned that higher criticism is based on several different foundations. We mentioned it; they are based on subjective conclusions, German fancies, and anti-supernaturalists, all right? And of course, we mentioned the subjective conclusions, the idea that you can kind of figure out different people wrote different things based on their literary writing style. And we mentioned that's just kind of goofy, all right? German fancies, of course, those German higher critics were studying the Bible, and they were trying to apply Bible truths like a modern-day German would see them, not the way a Jew would see them. And then we mentioned anti-supernaturalists. Of course, they did not believe in miracles. We mentioned as well some of the origins of higher criticism. We mentioned several different men. Two men I definitely don't want you to get confused about. There is Spinoza, who was the originator of the higher criticism. All right? And then we mentioned Eckhorn, who was the father of higher criticism. All right? And so don't get those two confused. Often they do get confused. We also mentioned Julius Wellhausen's kind of partner, Mr. Graff. He's the one that gave the theory of the Jehovistic and Elohistic, and the idea that the documents were written hundreds of years after Moses, all right? That's Mr. Graff. We mentioned the JEDP theory, all right? J standing for Jawistic or Yahwistic, E standing for Elohistic, C standing for, or the D standing for Deuteronomistic, and the P standing for priestly code. And we talked quite a little bit about that. Of course, you got a paper coming up about that. But the idea basically being that, of course, the Pentateuch, they say, was not written by Moses, but there was one guy who liked to use the name Jehovah quite a bit, and so he wrote a bunch of verses about Jehovah. There's another guy that liked to use Elohim quite a bit, and he wrote a bunch of stuff about Elohim. And then some guy came together, saw the Jawistic document, the Elohistic document, forged them together to make the JE document. Later on, of course, we mentioned during the time of Josiah, according to them, the book of the law was not actually found in the temple, but it was written in the temple and fabricated and with forgery. They created the book of Deuteronomy, according to the higher critics, and made it look like it was old, said that Moses wrote it, all right, but they wrote the book of Deuteronomy at that time. Then, of course, their theory is that another guy came along together, saw J and E, and decided to add D to it. And so the Deuteronomistic part of it was added to the Jawistic and Elohistic. And then eventually, after the captivity, during the exile and after the captivity, the prophets Ezra and Ezekiel, according to the higher critics, put together the priestly code, which would be the book of Leviticus. And of course, they basically said that Moses wrote it. And once again, according to the higher critics, these guys were being frauds because that Moses did not really write it. And then later on, several redactors came together and put them all together. And of course, now we have the Pentateuch. It's kind of a goofy idea, all right, but that is their theory on that. We mentioned some of the different books that they believe different things about. We mentioned the book of Isaiah, where they believe that chapters 1 through 40 was written by Isaiah, but chapters 41 through 66 were written by Deutero-Isaiah or a second Isaiah, not the same. And of course, they say that based on writing style. And of course, we mentioned the fact that you can't decide that just based off of literary style. We mentioned the personal name of God is Jehovah, and his title is Elohim. We also mentioned the fact that the higher critics didn't like the idea of Moses writing the Pentateuch because they claimed that Moses didn't even know how to write because writing wasn't around in Egypt during Moses' time, which is absolutely goofy. And we mentioned the archaeological evidence for governmental writing and legal writing in that area was the fact that the Code of Hammurabi, all right, was around, and that was legal code well before the time of Moses. And so Moses most assuredly had the ability to write those kind of things. All right, I believe that, there are a couple more things. We mentioned the book of Deuteronomy, and of course, Jesus used the book of Deuteronomy. And so we mentioned the fact that if Jesus used the book of Deuteronomy, and it was really a fraudulent book, then, why did Jesus not say so? And why would he use it, all right? And so we mentioned that. We mentioned, of course, the whole idea of the priestly code being put together by Ezra and Ezekiel, make them deceitful men. And, of course, they would not be holy prophets of God, all right, if they were deceitful men. All right, that concludes the review. Be praying for you. Looking forward to seeing you on Tuesday to take this quiz.